This week at Lebanon Road, we're talking about the providence of God. Along with J.D. Buckner, I'm Adam Fawn, and J.D., there's a lot of people at our building this week.
Yes, absolutely. Lots of pictures, lots of busy stuff going on.
Yeah, if you're not from Lebanon Road, we're having our pictorial directory done this week. So starting at about 2 o'clock, I think it is every day, folks are all over this building, coming in and out, getting pictures made. It's an exciting time, and we're looking forward to seeing the finished product eventually.
Yeah.
Hopefully not,
Lots of airbrushing.
Yeah. That's what I'm hoping for me. That would be wonderful if they would pull the computers out along with the cameras and take care. If they took care of all my flaws, it would be a blank picture.
Nah.
Yeah. Well, I was planning on this video thinking about the idea of God's providence, and of course, anytime you think about this subject, JD, there's one word in the book of Philippians that jumps out. In Philippians verse 15, because you can't say chapter 1 because there's not chapters in Philippians, where Paul is writing, of course, about meeting this runaway slave and converting him and then sending him back to his master. But then he writes in verse 15, "For this, perhaps, is why he parted from you for a while, that you might have him back forever." And then he mentions that you should welcome him back not as a slave anymore, but as a brother, because now he's a Christian. Mm-hmm. And anytime I read that little short book of Philippians, I love that little word perhaps. And one reason is, and this is an obvious statement, is that Paul is writing by inspiration. And I say that because God did not even choose to reveal to Paul, while he was writing this, that is why. Yeah, he met Philemon and he converted him and all those things. He said, no, this is one of those things I'm going to leave in the realm of you just will not know in the moment. And I like that because a lot of times that's how we live our lives, is we look back over an event or a series of events or even just a period of our lives, and we sort of have to look back and say, well, perhaps or maybe, to kind of use a more modern term, that's why that happened, or that's why I met this person, or that's why I moved here, or that's why this fell into place. But God never says you're going to know 100% of the time.
Right. I think that is, in my mind at least, the key to providence, is that I'm convinced it's something that you can't know in the present. But,
you got Christmas on your mind, don't you?
In the presents. It's not something you can know in the here and now, but perhaps you can know it only by looking back and seeing how that worked out and think, well, maybe that was the providence of God. And so I think that's exactly what's going on here with Paul and Onesimus and Philemon, is that maybe we can look back on this and see the providence of God working through here.
Yeah, and the other account I want to bring up, we won't take the time to read all the verses, is of course Joseph in the Old Testament. Mm-hmm. That's kind of the famous case study in providence, for sold into slavery by his brothers and all those things that even our little children learned in Bible school. But then when he looked back, when he met his brothers, or when his brothers finally figured out who he was, later in the book of Genesis, and he said, you meant this for evil, but God meant it for good, to save his people, or to save the people. But if my memory serves, J.D., never in the book of Genesis, at least as we have recorded, does God say to Joseph, because that was the time when God was speaking to the patriarchs, people. You never have a conversation where God said, this is why I've got you here. But Joseph's saying, no, there's no doubt in my mind that as awful as this series of events was, this is what God meant. But he had to have that long view of history through that whole series of events to get there.
Yeah, he wasn't able certainly to see it through all of those trials with the being in Potiphar's house, and then slavery, Potiphar's house, jail, and then
being forgotten in jail.
Yeah, all of that. But looking back, once he was second in command, I guess, over Egypt and talking to his brothers, he could certainly see how God had prepared him. I think not just putting him physically in that position, but also all of the preparation that he went through mentally and spiritually through that big trial. Another example that I thought of was Esther.
Yeah.
When her uncle comes to her and says that God will find a way to save his people, but it could be that you're here in this moment now for this purpose. God's providence.
Yeah, maybe this is why you are the queen. This is why you've come to the king. You've come to the kingdom for such a time as this.
Yeah.
You're basically saying, Esther, this is your moment. I'm convinced of it, whether you are or not, because I'm seeing the big picture. And in the moment, Esther wasn't.
Right.
she was scared. There's no doubt about that. But in that, and Esther's a wonderful example of faith. But in that one moment, she was not seeing the big picture. It took somebody saying, "Look at the big picture and see that this is a perhaps moment. This is a maybe moment."
Yeah, I mean, Xerxes could have not extended that scepter, and she could have just been killed,
Yeah.
and that would have been the end of that. So it's a scary thing.
I heard somebody say one time that providence. I've used this in sermons that providence is really more amazing than miracles. Sometimes they say if we could just go back to the age of miracles and just see God, part the Red Sea or heal someone of a sickness miraculously, then we'd be okay. But they said really, a miracle obviously is an amazing thing, but it's sort of just God sticking His finger and it's taken care of. But he said providence is God. He said picking up His orchestra baton and orchestrating the streams of time all into one point where these two people happen to meet or where this situation just happens to fall into place. And that's more amazing than a miracle because He doesn't just sort of, stop up the dam and fix the problem and step back out.
Yeah. I've never really thought of it that way, but that is a really neat way to think about it. I've always thought of providence as being much more subtle and technical than miracles, but that's really a powerful way to think about that.
Yeah, and it does take the, looking back, it does take the perspective, but it also takes just an open mind to be able to say, maybe it wasn't, here again, back to Philemon, perhaps it was and perhaps it wasn't. But even if it wasn't, if you look at Philemon, even if it wasn't God's providence, it was still a good thing.
Yeah.
And so you look back at someone who, gets better from a sickness, or a couple who just happens to go to the same college and meet, or live in the same neighborhood and meet, or whatever. Maybe that's God's providence, and maybe it isn't. But it is looking back and seeing that God can use all of it for His good and to His glory, whether He orchestrated that series of events for that moment or not. And that's kind of the perspective it takes.
Yeah. A little bit of faith.
Just a little bit. Or a lot. We hope this is encouraging to you to consider something. This is a subject that books have been written about, but we want just to think about because it's an encouraging subject to think about how God still works, and still is powerful and still is able to do amazing things, even though we're not in the age of miracles anymore. We want to let you know that we will not be doing a video for the next 2 weeks. It's almost like some holidays or something.
We got nothing else to do.
Yeah, no.
Just lazy.
Yeah. We kind of figure we'll be busy, and you probably don't want to look at our ugly mugs for 8 or 9 minutes.
It's our Christmas present to you.
to not be here.
Said Christmas. It's our holiday present to you.
to not be here for those couple of weeks. But we know you want to spend time with family and friends, and we do too. But we plan on being back with you on January the 8th for our next video, so a couple of weeks from now. There's all kinds of things coming up, family and friends, but the Youth Progressive Dinner is this weekend. The Soup Day is Monday, and what time is that on Monday?
It's at 10 a.m. We can use some drivers if you're watching this and you want to come help us make some deliveries. It won't take all that long, but certainly a good work. Like I said in the pulpit, warm some hearts and warm some bellies.
That's right. That's right. And that'll be Monday the 23rd, this coming Monday from the time we're recording this. And as we said, we will not record one of these for the next 2 Wednesdays, so it'll be January the 8th when we are back with you on these videos. Until then, this is this year.
Yeah.
At
Happy
Lebanon
New
Road.
Year.
This is this week at Lebanon Road.